Which celebrities have famously gotten away with serious crimes? Karl Malone, a Hall of Fame basketball player who got away with impregnating a 12-year-old girl at age 20. The reason he wasn't charged was because the family of the girl knew he was going to be rich in the NBA, so they avoided charges for child support. The son of the 13-year-old, Demetris Bell, went on to play in the NFL for a few years too, and Karl Malone never acknowledged him as his son ever. The only child he abandoned that he acknowledged was a daughter who made it to the WNBA. Edit: he had 7 children and abandoned 3 of them just to clear that up. Rick James. In 1991, him and his girlfriend kidnapped and tortured a girl, to include but not limited to sexual abuse, forcing her to smoke crack cocaine, burning her with a hot crack pipe. I sure do love me some funk. But he was a certified piece of shit. This thread is a real eye-opener. So people like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes have their names run through the mud after having breakdowns. But some other celebrities have committed actual horrible crimes and nothing happens to them. This is awful. People like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes have their names run through the mud after having breakdowns. But some other celebrities have committed actual horrible crimes and nothing happens to them. That's a great point, and sadly these victim celebrities don't usually get to share their full side of the story. Typically because of lack of airtime or non-disclosure agreements with their management label studio. Don King, likely one of, if not the most famous boxing promoters of all time, set up the Rumble in the Jungle and the Thriller in Manila, served less than 4 years for stomping a man to death because he owed him 600. Pardoned. I came here to mention this. He stomped a man to death, and nearly every fighter he managed has got bad stories to say about him and how he stole their money. Vince Neil killed someone drunk driving. There's a huge list of famous and or rich people who have killed someone drunk driving and not even gotten a slap on the wrist for it. Caitlyn Jenner for instance. And Matthew Broderick, although dangerous driving and 100 fine. Victor Salva, director of Jeepers Creepers. The man is a convicted pedophile who filmed himself molesting a 12-year-old boy and only served 15 months. Still making movies now. Francis Ford Coppola supported and assisted Salva in getting several charges reduced and dropped. He also threatened the boy victim with being blacklisted out of Hollywood. Can't be a fan of anyone in this world. In 1975, Aerosmith vocalist Steven Tyler convinced the parents of 14-year-old groupie Julia Holcomb to sign over guardianship to him so that she could live with him in Boston. Tyler, who was 27 at the time, dated and did drugs with Julia for 3 years before they eventually broke up after unplanned pregnancy which resulted in an abortion. Tyler then returned Julia to her parents at the age of 17. That's just barely scratching the tip of the iceberg. It gets more messed up the more you dig into it. But nevertheless, Tyler would continue his successful music career and even be inducted to the Hall of Fame in 2001. That is so dark and disturbing. Has Julia ever spoke up about what she has been through? In the UK, our main satellite provider, Sky, has produced a documentary on all of this. I know because I've been bombarded with adverts for weeks. Here's an article on it. Link. Seeing Kirk Douglas being mentioned reminded me of how Clark Gable date raped Loretta Young, resulting in a daughter she had to have in secret and pass off as adopted. She only let him meet the child once. When Young was elderly, she heard the term date rape and inquired its meaning. When told, she allegedly said, "That's what happened to me with Clark." Just awful on so many levels. The sheer amount of times this happened and is still happening to young women in the industry is sickening. My mom told me a story about her which ended in attempted date rape. It was the 70s. She said they didn't even have the word date rape yet. I asked her what they called it back then. She said a bad date. That stuck with me. The prevalence of molestation and sexual abuse pre-90s is really hard to understate. I understand that sexual assaults and child sexual abuse still occurs. But there's something strange about how many boomers and older using that term more descriptively than jokingly as my SN just treat that kind of thing as background noise. My grandmother related a story to me when she was in her 90s about working as a coat and hat check girl at a department store in New York City in the 1930s. telling me that she preferred that one because unlike some other places her and orphan sister and brother would work, this one had a table between me and the men, which kept them from getting as antsy. My grandmother had 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy, and all 4 girls were molested by a friend of the family and survived multiple sexual assaults through the 70s. Heck, I was born in the early 80s, conceived in what my mom never defined as date rape, but almost certainly was. Elvis Presley always had a thing for young girls and would invite them over for sleepovers. He was obsessed with virginal girls and called them cherries. Of course, he met his wife, Priscilla, when she was only 14, yet people just shrugged this off and thought it was fine. Half the Rolling Stones had 14-year-old girlfriends on the road with them. I do sometimes wonder how many DUIs get swept away here in Southern California. I'd assume all the smaller stuff like celebrity DUIs are non-issues. Remember even Sweetheart Ray's with a spoon drunkenly asking the cop who pulled her over if he knew who she was. That was in Atlanta, and it didn't work for her to say that. Pretty sure Charlie Sheen has a lot to answer for yet has somehow never served any serious jail time. Aside from other numerous domestic abuse accusations in his past, he actually shot Kelly Preston in the arm during their relationship. I don't think anything came from that. Preston was probably just glad to get away alive. Didn't he also knowingly give people STDs? There were definitely accusations that he hid his HIV status from his sexual partners. Bria Olsen, one of his former girlfriends, claimed that he did not tell her about his HIV status, and they had sex using lambskin condoms which do not protect against HIV transmission, though she did not catch it. Seems like pretty much every rock and roll star from the 70s 80s raped children. I mean, it still happens. The bassist from Walk the Moon took young girls to his hotel room after shows on tours. Pretty sure Davey Vanity, some huge emo Tumblr star from the Zeros, groomed multiple young girls. One of them was 11 Jessie Slaughter. Jessie Slaughter. Holy shit, I haven't heard that name in forever. James Brown. Look him up, and what legal trouble he got into over the years. Didn't seem like a very nice guy, and he got arrested and charged a lot. Lots of assault, and in one case he kept a woman trapped so he could use her for sexual gratification. Might not all be true, but sure were a lot of charges over the years. He beat singer Tammy Terrell. From the wiki, in 1962, 17-year-old Terrell became involved in an abusive relationship with James Brown, who was 12 years her senior. One night on the road in 1963, Terrell left Brown after he assaulted her for not watching his entire performance. Bobby Bennett, former member of the famous Flames, witnessed the incident. He beat Tammy Terrell terrible. She was bleeding, shedding blood. Tammy left him because she didn't want her butt whipped, said Bennett. I know R. Kelly is in trouble now, but long did he go free after that whole pissing on a kid thing. A decade. Roman Polanski. He's had a heck of a life, but never faced up to this one. Creep. According to Tom O'Neill and his book about Charles Manson, Polanski forced Sharon Tate to have sex with 2 men and recorded it on video. The video was seen by the police and brought back to his house so the public wouldn't find out. Apparently just one of many incidents. Honestly, when I first heard about Polanski and saw a picture of him, I drew a completely different picture of him. Finding out about all of this was somehow mind-boggling. Edit. The book is called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA and the Secret History of the 60s. Man, that book is nuts. I recommend to everybody because it truly is a rabbit hole. Considering the fact that he raped a young teenage girl with little remorse, I don't have a hard time believing that he treated poor Sharon like shit. Marcos Alonso, a Spanish footballer who plays for Chelsea. He killed a 19-year-old girl while driving drunk and got away with little real punishment. Salman Khan. So many famous crimes: killing a black buck, hit and run with his car, etc. They even made a game on one of his crimes, and he got that game banned from Play Store. Note, not the guy from Khan Academy. On the 28th of September 2002, Khan was arrested for rash and negligent driving after his car ran into a bakery in Mumbai. One person who was sleeping on the pavement outside the bakery died, and 3 others were injured in the accident. On the 6th of May 2015, Khan was found guilty of all charges in the case. The Bombay Sessions Court concluded that Khan was driving the car under the influence of alcohol, causing the death of 1 and serious injury to 4 homeless persons. Sessions Judge D.W. Deshpande convicted the actor for culpable homicide not amounting to murder and sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Later in the same day, Khan, being represented by senior counsel Amit Desai, was granted bail by the Bombay High Court till the 8th of May. 2015. The kidnapping and eventual death of prime witness police constable Ravindra Patil remains a mystery, with some suspecting the involvement of organized crime. In December 2015, Khan was acquitted of all charges from this case due to lack of evidence. That's pretty ducked up. 2002 crime. 2015 sentencing. No speedy trial there for sure. It's practically criminal that it takes that long. Celebrities are ready to spend any amount of money to prolong shit rather than own up to their crimes. Sanjay Dutt did the same thing. R. Kelly and his sex tape with a 14-year-old. I watched all 10H of Surviving R. Kelly, and yes, he's probably gonna rot in jail. But the fact that he managed to get away with it for 30 years is truly shocking. They told Dodge to put a glove on while he was wearing another glove. John Hamlink was charged in a violent hazing incident at his college fraternity that led to it being shut down in 1993. Ham and his fraternity brothers nearly beat a pledge to death with a paddle, assaulted his genitals with a claw hammer, then set his pants on fire. The court let him go on the hazing charge on the condition that he would complete probation. Ham shortly fled Texas before the court could file a new separate assault charge. See, now this is a good one. He is beloved. And most people like myself had never heard this story. Apparently they set his pants on fire so that no one would believe his story. I'm really surprised to not have seen anyone mention Phil Spector. Yeah, he was convicted for 2 murders in the early 2000s, but it was straight up out in the open that he was an abusive, violent, and unhinged menace for the whole 40 years before that. He put the Ramones through the ducking ringer and pointed a gun at DD over him not wanting to get back in the recording booth after spending 12 straight hours overnight in there. After that incident, DD went on to say something along the lines of "it's only a matter of time until he kills someone, and so he would." Editing at a ringer, and he actually only had 1 murder conviction, but 2 trials. Ringer, hardly no emergency room. When DD Ramone says Summones is a nutcase, you can be damn well sure the guy's absolutely a world-class total nutcase. Jimmy Savile. The documentary Louis Theroux did after it all came out is so disturbing. There's one interview in particular he does with a victim that made me feel physically sick. I get so angry thinking about it all. Prince Andrew. Beatity he time it was ph a cycle impossible f4hm to southwestern eat. If the underlying material weren't so dark, that would be one of the funniest interviews in history. The lying was so blatant, childish, ignorant, patronizing and tone deaf, it was astonishing. Heck, I'm lying. It was one of the funniest anyway. O.J. Simpson. We all know it. How do we all know it though? It's not as if he wrote a book describing exactly how he did it or anything. Yeah. And it's not like he went on TV and recorded an interview explaining how he'd hypothetically have done it either, if he did it. But obviously we all know he didn't. You know, he allegedly drunkenly confessed to the crime once when the trial was still ongoing. Allegedly. Mind you, someone claims he did at least. Robert Blake Link. To clarify, he killed his wife. She was in his car, which was parked on a side street around the corner from the restaurant, across the street, and behind a dumpster next to a construction site. Then he told the police he wasn't there because he had to go back to the restaurant to get his gun. Edit more words. Ted Kennedy for leaving Mary Jo Kopechne to drown. Floyd Mayweather has multiple domestic violence charges with different ex-girlfriends. He got a slap on the wrist for all of them. You'd imagine after the 5th, 6th one he would be tried for multiple offenses, but he never did. Steve Tyler convincing the parents of a 14-year-old to sign over guardianship to him and then getting her pregnant is something that isn't scrutinized or condemned enough. I mean, if R. Kelly is a sexual predator, Why does this guy seem to come out unscathed? By the way, in no way justifying what R. Kelly is alleged to have done. Nobuyasuke Kishi, Prime Minister of Japan in the late 50s. Ducker was called the Devil of Manchuria during the Japanese occupation of China, and was responsible for most of Unit 731 experiments. If you don't know what it is, it makes some things about the Holocaust look tame. In the final days of the war, seeing the tides shifting violently against Japan, he decided to cooperate with the Americans so as to not be executed for crimes against humanity. Pretty disgusting human being, and he never got punished for what he did. Love RHCP, but Anthony Kiedis admitted to raping a 14-year-old girl when he was 24 in his own autobiography. Holy duck, dude. Jimmy Savile. This is your regular reminder that Chris Brown violently assaulted Rihanna. Paul Rudd stole everyone's heart. Roman Polanski, the guy fled to Europe to avoid jail in the US for drugging and raping a minor. He's living very comfortably over there and is even being given awards and celebrated in France. I feel bad for him due to his childhood and then of course, losing his wife and unborn son in such a horrific way, but that doesn't excuse what he did. Caitlyn Jenner drunkenly, vehicularly manslaughtered someone and basically got a slap on the wrist. Apparently it's slightly different as apparently it was an accident. I read about it years ago, so it wasn't that fresh in my memory. Ted Kennedy got drunk, drove off a pier, and left a woman to die, then got people to lie for him. He also sexually assaulted women frequently. Mark Wahlberg did some questionable stuff during his youth. He was way beyond questionable. Bill Cosby raped a bunch of people and called it a day. Apparently he's getting a new show after getting out of prison on a technicality for drugging and raping people. Jimmy Page raped Lori Maddox for several years, starting when she was 13. Page knew full well that statutory rape could get him in big trouble, even in the 70s, so went to some lengths to keep the relationship hidden. It is nevertheless heavily corroborated and well documented. The answer is always Chris Brown. That absolute piece of shit.